weeks ago, I received a letter from a constituent in Sarasota, a junior in high school named Audrey Huang. 2 years ago, she started her nonprofit called the Pink Folder, advocating for women across the globe. After writing 62 articles, sending 350 care packages, and reading 462 studies, she has touched more lives and hearts at 17 than some of us have at 50. But knowing the limits of her nonprofit, I have realized that mercy has a horizon. Somewhere past Sarasota, in Sudan, in Darfur, there are women her hands cannot reach. There are women her care packages will never see. But our policy can reach them today, and we have an obligation to do so. Pass this legislation to protect women in the Middle East. Now, first, I want to address the biggest argument made on the negation by Representatives Lieberzone and Jamail, who tell you that the UAE is going to turn to China under this legislation. Representative Rosemeyer already gave you an argument about how the UAE is entrenched with America, but I actually think there's an easier warrant for us to access this argument. Understand that China does not have the capacity to quickly aid the UAE right now. It's very simple. Missiles don't come with Amazon Prime shipping. Only the United States has the military bases and the infrastructure to supply the UAE with weapons that they need in this war. If I take Representative Lieberzone at his highest ground and agree that the status quo is changing day by day, the UAE cannot afford to change its infrastructure right now. This means that under this legislation, we do not lose any of our leverage. We just ensure it's not put on the backs of bullets and guns. But secondly, even if you don't buy that argument, I'm still passing this legislation because I refuse to believe what our weapons have become. Amnesty International told us in 2025 that in Sudan, the UAE has backed the RSF and they've inflicted widespread sexual violence on women and girls, with monitors having documented nearly 1,300 cases. Representative Jamail, the fact that we're replenishing their supply allows them to continue leaking weapons to Sudan, allowing them to continue these abuses against women. That's why the same Amnesty report finds that the UAE is a documented hub for diversion, funneling arms into conflict zones like Sudan and Libya, where these abuses occur. When we stop arms sales to UAE, Section 2 finally ends those abuses. I refuse the affirmation when they start a war and then use the UAE as a political bargaining chip and weigh that against the lives of women. As Congress, we have an obligation to defend those abroad. If anything, Audrey Huang taught me that distance is the only thing that allows this Congress to ignore suffering. Pass this legislation and close it.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Questioners, rise. Between those standing, that first goes to Jamail.
Hi.
Hello. If the UAE does not get any weapons from the US that they will use in the Sudanese genocide, what does passing this legislation change?
So right now, they're leaking weapons, and then we replenish the weapons, which enables them to leak weapons.
We are not replenishing the same stock of weapons that is going to Sudan.
Their aggregate military supply remains the same, even though they're leaking weapons to Sudan.
That is not how it works. If I give a set of defensive missiles to the UAE and their offensive stock is...
As long as they can battle Iran, because we're replenishing them, they can afford to leak weapons without losing any military leverage in the war.
If I send them defensive weapons, that does not replenish their offensive weapon supply.
Right, as long as they maintain leverage in the war, they can still leak it.
Padia.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. What is a country's #1 priority during a time of military conflict?
Survival.
Exactly. What was the country that Iran striked the most during the war? Exactly. If that's the case and they're still hanging in that balance, what incentive do they not have to find another country to shelter them?
You're just proving my point. The negation has championed the fact that the status quo is changing from day to day. If the UAE can't get China's missiles tomorrow...
Last week, the UAE sent billions of dollars to Iran. Why would they not look for another supplier?
Missiles tomorrow.
Thank you, Representative.
For the United States.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Believe it or not, predictive markets have actually just recently hit the National Speech and Debate Association stage with DebQuery, an app that can tell every congressional debater the probability that they'll win a round. Representative Lieberzone, 30%. Representative Boyd, 10%. Representative Rosemeyer, 15%. But I don't actually care about any of them. Since I'm on the negation, the probability that I'm winning is 100%. Fail this legislation to keep average Americans safe from predictive gambling markets. Now, I don't actually care about what the CFTC is regulating right now. Representatives Fung and Valmikam told us that they're doing a poor job, but that's just the status quo. When you pass in time, the CFTC can just implement more regulations so that predictive markets are getting safer. And that's exactly what they're doing right now. CFTC told us themselves that it's already suing states over market regulation because fragmented state rules increase fraud risk and weaken consumer protection. But secondly, they've already implemented national licensing requirements and prosecuted illegal operators. But what's so uniquely good about the CFTC is that it's federal regulation. April 24th, the CFTC told us that Congress granted it the sole authority over prediction markets. That means every time the CFTC passes one of these regulations, it applies to every single one of our 50 states. That's what makes the status quo so uniquely solvent. However, under this legislation, when you turn to online gambling, that's actually state regulated. The American Gaming Association told us in July of 2025 that gambling regulations are governed through individual state statutes with different rules in every single state. That is so bad for regulation because now, in order to have uniform, good regulation, you need 50 state legislatures to actually pass any of that policy. So, let me allow you to go through the two negative impacts of that. First, Representative Fung told us that right now, the CFTC is not fighting corruption and insider trading. But what are you asking us to do? You're asking us to have 50 groups of insider traders to pass legislation to ban insider trading. I don't need a predictive market to tell me that that's simply not going to happen. But second, Representative Valmikam told us that state legislatures are going to protect our youth. I would actually argue the opposite. Right now, when the CFTC passes regulation and applies it to every single one of 50 states, illegal operators have nowhere to hide. But under this legislation, if even one state does not pass policy to protect our youth, illegal operators can just go hide there. That turns every single one of her impacts to the negation's world, especially when Baptist Health tells us in May of 2026 that illegal operators lead our youth to depression and even suicidal thoughts. The affirmations world traps them in this. Free them and fail this legislation.
Speech 3 minutes, 9 seconds. All questioners rise at this time. Valmikam.
Hi. How many online gambling apps does the CFTC regulate in the status quo?
They don't regulate online gambling.
Exactly.
They regulate predictive markets.
Exactly. They don't regulate online gambling. Wouldn't you agree that predictive markets have changed drastically in the last few years?
Sure.
Yeah. So if predictive markets are becoming more and more like online gambling and the CFTC doesn't know how to regulate gambling, why do you maintain the status quo?
You told us yourself the changes only happened recently. We have to give the CFTC time to actually regulate them. You
Wait,
can't
but
ask
the
them to make that switch
CFTC
immediately.
has absolutely zero history of regulating
Yeah,
gambling,
because they
while the
haven't
states
changed
do.
before. Now that they're
The
changing,
states
they
have so
regulate
much
it.
history.
You said that the CFTC was suing states. What were the states doing?
They were entertaining illegal bookies.
That's not true. They were adding regulation. The current CFTC is very pro-prediction
I
markets
fundamentally
to the
disagree with
point
this
that they
argument.
sued states for
I
regulation.
fundamentally disagree with this argument because the CFTC has the jurisdiction to pass
I'm sorry.
legislation that increases
This is
regulation.
a fact. The current
If you can let me
CFTC
finish,
doesn't want
it doesn't even
regulation.
matter if individual states pass regulation because illegal bookies can just go hide in other states. At least under the
The
CFTC, it's all
has
uniform
no regulation. They sued states
I
for
want uniform
adding.
Thank you.
federal
Both
regulation.
speakers may be seated.
For the very last time ever, I'm Representative Xiao, Elizabeth Xiao, Xiao. I'll take a thumbs up from my judges whenever you're ready. Everyone good? Throughout my life, I've heard a lot of really interesting campaign slogans. All the way with LBJ, keep it cool with Coolidge, and vote for Representative He. Wee! But my favorite has to come from Andrew Yi, who ran for the Democratic presidential bid in 2020 under the slogan, Math. Make America think harder. 6 years later, it seems our education system needs the same advice. So I'll run on the same slogan. Pass this legislation to make America think harder. First, the crux of the negation advocacy by Representatives Hathalia, Tawari, and Fung tells us that the status quo allows disabled students to catch up to everyone else. Representative Al-Meekum already told you that it's illegal for schools to ban students from using AI because of the ADA. But I would actually argue that AI is decreasing disabled students' ability to learn right now, specifically because it's telling teachers they're learning when they're really not. The American Federation of Teachers told us that America has run a standards-based education system since 1983, which means teachers adjust the pace of material based on students' test scores. When you allow students to inflate their scores when they're not actually learning, you cause teachers to speed up the speed of curriculum while students get left in the dust. This is the same logic as to why, if I'm teaching an immigrant English, I'm not just going to give them a translator, because even though they appear fluent, they don't actually understand what I'm saying. Right now, our students are succeeding, but they're not actually thinking. They're not actually learning. You need to stop telling them that the only way to succeed is to just dig themselves into a deeper hole than they were before. But secondly, even if I concede to the negation that all of the benefits of AI go away under this legislation, I'm always passing to restore our education system to what it should be. AI is stripping away what it means to be human in our school system. It's disconnecting us from our teachers, with the Center for Democracy and Technology telling us in October of 2025 that half of students agree that AI in class makes them feel less connected to their teachers. Like Mr. Smith, who taught me to advocate for women in my first speech, for children in my second. I would never know how to speak, to be the person that I am, if I didn't have a connection to my teacher. But secondly, to the students around us, with Spectrum News telling us 7:30 this morning that a quarter of children said they'd rather talk to AI as opposed to humans. You, the 20 best debaters in the country, are here because you value talking to other people, sharing your ideas. The reason why debate is one of the only homes I've ever had is because humans were there to support me when I couldn't support myself. I will never allow our education to be stripped of what it truly means to be human and allow every student to be replaced with a robot. Pass this legislation and let us always remain who we truly are, human.
Speech, 3 minutes and 10 seconds. All questioners rise now. I will go to Representative Abuko.
Hey.
Hi, Representative. In the status quo, are students who are special needs underserved?
No.
So they're not struggling in the status quo, students who are special needs?
Because the ADA tells us we cannot disadvantage disabled students under a legal
The
basis.
truth is, under the status quo, even with the ADA, kids who are special needs are still struggling. If your policy will make even one more student who has special needs, make it harder for him or her to learn,
Students can still
how is
access
that?
AI under this legislation. Therefore, it does not decrease their ability to learn. If anything, it increases it without inflating their
question to you,
scores,
if it's the
because now
ADA
teachers can't just speed up the curriculum. Hey.
Me and you are both very privileged to have teachers that have had the time for us.
I completely agree.
Considering the fact that we're amidst the largest teacher shortage our country has ever faced, should we not be alleviating the burden that our teachers face in the status quo?
It is an even greater teacher shortage when every teacher is not replaced by a true human, but rather a computer instructing our
if
students.
teachers now have more time for instruction because they're spending less
Because
time on
when
administrative
AI
tasks,
replaces original
does that
thought,
not make
it is not
AI
human
a
connection that is
positive?
teaching our students. The teacher being human is what makes them a teacher.
Exactly. So let them
Thank you.
teach.
Both speakers may